Congressman, what can you tell us about anything you understand or have seen that we have not as a public yet about the emails from Jeffrey Epstein regarding Donald Trump?
Well, I think, first of all, they're shocking to me with regard to some of the language. If you actually see the native emails, as opposed to just summaries from other people, you'll see that there's just a lot of casual references to Donald Trump, a lot of unflattering references to him. But what you pointed out is disturbing, to say the least, that he, quote unquote, knew about the girls, which is obviously opposite of what Donald Trump has told the rest of the world with regard to his association with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, in the 23,000 pages that were released by the Republicans, there's a lot to go through, and our staff is still going through it. But right now, the White House is actually scrambling to try to get people off the discharge petition before Adelita Grijalva actually signs it. So they obviously take this production very seriously right now.
Let's go through some of the emails that are being made public for the first time. First of all, was there any resistance from Jeffrey Epstein's estate to complying with the subpoena from the Oversight Committee?
Not that I know of. In fact, they're planning to produce more documents. They're producing them on a rolling basis to the committee. So I'm looking forward to seeing those as well.
So there's more.
Correct. There might be a lot more. We just don't know. But it appears that they are cooperating, and they are trying to produce it as quickly as they can.
Okay, so this is one of the emails that was released today. It was sent on December 16th, 2015. Michael Wolff writing at 4:26 p.m. on that day, quote, "I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the House, then that gives you valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him, generating a debt. Of course, it is possible that when asked, he'll say, Jeffrey is a great guy and has gotten a raw deal and is a victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed in a Trump regime." What does that, how do you read that? What does that mean to you?
Well, again, it would be good to get more context, and that's why, in part, we're asking for the rest of the Epstein files that are in the possession of the administration. But what it appears on face value to me is that Donald Trump was on his plane, was in his house, according to what is suggested by Mr. Wolff, and therefore, if he were to lie and say he was not on the plane or not in his house, then Jeffrey Epstein would have leverage over him, which Wolff is suggesting he could use in different ways to his advantage.
It's just so fascinating that Robert Mueller does an entire investigation about the Russian attack on 2016. You have all these questions of Donald Trump's businesses. You have all these red lines drawn. And Trump loses his mind, is just now going about the business, in his view, of seeking retribution against anyone that investigated him. His own circle of people who associated and socialized with him were talking about leverage over him if he lied about, quote, being on the plane or to the House. What does that say to you?
What it says to me, birds of a feather flock together. I mean, Donald Trump associated with some highly irreputable people, including Jeffrey Epstein. Now, when you meet with these survivors, and I'm sure that you've met with some of them as well, the horrors that they went through as part of this child sex trafficking ring cannot be overstated. And so, for the purpose of doing justice to them, we should absolutely get the rest of these Epstein files. In many cases, they don't even have access to the files that detail the trauma that they went through, which they have long forgotten because of that trauma. And we need those files to prevent this from ever happening again. And so that's why we need to press on a bipartisan basis to get to the bottom of this, Nicole.
What is the next step in getting the files released?
Well, as you know, we have this bipartisan subpoena that is basically trying to compel the White House to produce more documents, but they've really slow-rolled the production of these documents, and whatever they've produced so far is already in the public domain. We've seen this before. And so now this discharge petition, which you referred to before, is going to be important in basically allowing us to vote on a law, a piece of legislation that could become law that would then force the White House to produce the rest of these files. And so that's why it's important that Adelita Grijalva gets sworn in, then she signs the discharge petition, and then we move forward.
I believe we just put a shot up on the screen. It is about to happen right now. Once she's sworn in and signs that petition, how quickly do you think it puts in motion an actual movement of files?
Basically, it's about, my understanding is it's a 7 to 9 day legislative day process to actually get it on the calendar and voted on in the House. Then it goes to the Senate, of course. But then it's a date certain. It has to be voted upon at that point.
Okay, let's listen in.
And that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which you are about to enter. So help you God.
I do.
Congratulations. You're now a member of the 119th Congress.
That is now Congresswoman Grijalva. We interviewed her as Congresswoman-elect. What way, other than a delay tactic for having that 218 signature, do you view the Speaker's timing on swearing her in?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I don't see it any other way. I think that the shutdown was conveniently used as a shutdown of the Epstein inquiry. And so now, as you know, we convene, and the committees convene, the investigations continue, and so now the process of the investigating hopefully will go with all deliberate speed at this point.
Let me just show you one more thing before we let you go. We read that one of the emails from Michael Wolff to Jeffrey Epstein, quote, if he, Trump, says he hasn't been on the plane or to the House, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that looks potentially that potentially generates a positive benefit for you, or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him, generating a debt. As you said, clear leverage being communicated between these two men. Here's what the White House press secretary said when she was asked point blank if Donald Trump spent time at Jeffrey Epstein's house with a victim, which is something that Jeffrey Epstein himself says to Ghislaine Maxwell in an email.
I have your statement about the new Epstein emails that have been released by House Democrats. Separate from why you believe the emails were made public, can you address their substance? Did the president ever spend hours at Jeffrey Epstein's house with a victim?
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And what President Trump has always said is that he was from Palm Beach, and so was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep.
Now, one thing we should point out is that Donald Trump didn't give that explanation that he was kicked out, quote, because he was a pedophile and a creep. What Donald Trump said was because he was, quote, stealing them from me. So Leavitt and Trump are not on the same page about that relationship. But what do you think it says that she doesn't deny the substance of the emails between Epstein and Maxwell?
Yeah, that was very interesting. She didn't say that he did not spend hours with this victim, whose name is redacted in the email. All she said is he did nothing wrong. Well, I mean, before, I don't think that he even admitted to being in the house. And so I think the story continues to evolve on Donald Trump's part. Shocker. I mean, he doesn't necessarily, he's not candid when he's asked point-blank questions. And so that's that's very disturbing. The whole set of statements about him, what he has said in return, and how we continue to learn more the more information that we get from the Jeffrey Epstein estate and in other sources.
Congressman, thank you so much for your time. We're going to